My mother-in-law faked a terminal illness to trick us into selling our home. And today, I watch the sheriff drag her screaming off the property that I now own. I am shaking as I write this, not from fear, but from the aftershocks of a betrayal so deep it nearly destroyed me. 3 months ago, I was living my dream life in a penthouse in New York City. Now, I am standing in a rotting, foreclosed house in Virginia, holding my newborn son, realizing that the woman who swore to love me like a daughter actually plotted to have me committed to a mental institution just to steal my baby and my credit cards. She played on my husband's grief and my own guilt to lure us into a trap. She wanted to turn me into a breeding mare and discard me once I delivered her heir. She thought she could lock me in a storage room and starve me into submission while she drained my bank accounts. But she forgot one thing. You should never corner a mother who has nothing left to lose. They call me heartless for leaving an old woman homeless. They say I destroyed my husband's family over money. My name is Zoe. I am 32 years old, a senior interior designer for a firm that stages luxury penthouses in Manhattan. And I am a liar. Well, perhaps that is too harsh of an opening. I am a wife. I am a soon-to-be mother. I am a woman who pays her taxes, recycles diligently, and calls her own parents in Ohio every Sunday evening without fail. But when I look in the mirror of my sleek, modern bathroom in Long Island City, Queens, the woman staring back at me, with her perfectly highlighted chestnut hair and confident gray eyes, has a rot in the foundation. I have a secret to the outside world. My life with Mark is the American dream realized. We live on the 18th floor of a glass and steel high-rise overlooking the East River. From our balcony, you can see the Empire State Building piercing the sky like a needle. Mark is 34, a software engineer with a gentle smile and a heart that is unfortunately too big for his own good. He thinks we are financially invincible. He thinks my salary goes entirely into our joint savings account and our 401ks. He does not know about the $50,000. That is the number that haunts me at 3 in the morning. $50,000 in credit card debt from my 20s. A time when I tried to buy happiness with designer handbags and trips to Tulum that I could not afford. I have chipped away at it, secretly siphoning off my bonuses, paying it down slowly, terrified that one day a letter from a collection agency will slip through the cracks and land in Mark's hands. That guilt is a heavy coat I wear, even in the summer. It makes me overcompensate. It makes me control every aspect of our household to ensure no other chaos can enter. But chaos does not knock. It rings the phone on a Tuesday evening. It was barely 6 o'clock. The golden hour sun was flooding our living room. Bouncing off the quartz countertops I had hand-selected, I was chopping bell peppers for a stir-fry, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the knife calming my nerves. Mark walked in, his face pale, holding a plastic stick in his hand. "Zooey," he whispered, his voice trembling. I stopped chopping. I looked at the stick, 2 pink lines. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. The debt, the secrets, the fear, it all vanished, replaced by a rush of pure, terrifying joy. We hugged in the kitchen, Mark lifting me off the ground, spinning me until I was dizzy. We were going to be parents. We were going to have a family. It was the happiest moment of my life. Then Mark made the mistake. "We have to tell Mom," he said, his eyes shining with tears. "She has been waiting for this for years." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Patricia, my mother-in-law, she lived in Virginia, in a crumbling ancestral home that she spoke of as if it were Versailles. We rarely visited, mostly because every interaction with her felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. But Mark loved her. He was her only son, her golden boy, her retirement plan. Mark put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen island. "Hey, Mama," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sitting down?" There was a pause on the other end. Then, a ragged, wheezing breath. "Mark, is that you?" The voice was weak, trembling, sounding nothing like the sharp-tongued woman I remembered from our wedding. "I am Xiao Jing Haoling. 2# is greater than I am having a bad day. Honey, my chest. Xiao Jing Haoling. 2# is greater than it hurts so much." Mark's smile vanished. "Mom, what is wrong? I just wanted to hear your voice," she rasped. "The doctors. Xiao Jing Haoling. 2# is greater than they say it is. My heart again. Congestive failure, they think. Or maybe the cancer is back. They are not sure. I am just so tired. Mark, I do not know how much time I have left." I watched Mark crumble. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. "Mom, stop," he said. "We have good news. Zoe is pregnant. You are going to be a grandma." I expected a gasp of joy. I expected congratulations. Instead, a wail pierced the air. A sound so loud and shrill it distorted the speaker. "Oh God," Patricia screamed, sounding like she was being physically tortured. "Oh, sweet Jesus. Take me now." "Mom," Mark panicked. "I will never see him," she sobbed, her voice suddenly strong and hysterical. "I am going to die alone in this big house before I ever get to hold my grandbaby. Oh, the cruelty of fate, to give me a grandchild just as the Lord is calling me home." I narrowed my eyes, watching the phone. My interior monologue shifted from sympathy to suspicion instantly. Just 10 seconds ago, she was too weak to speak, and now she had the lung capacity of an opera singer. Patricia continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Mark, Xiao Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than I need you. I need family. If I am going to die, I want to die with my family in this house. Please, Xiao Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than bring her here. Bring the baby here. Let me see my legacy before I close my eyes forever." Mark looked at me, his eyes pleading. I bit my lip. The debt, my job, our lease, my life in New York. We cannot just move. "Mom," Mark said gently, "Zoe's job, Xiao Jing Haoling, our Jing Hao Dayu, is her job more important than your dying mother?" Patricia interrupted, her tone sharpening instantly before softening again. "Never mind. I understand. She hates me. I will just... Xiao Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than I will just lie here and wait for the end." She hung up. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. The stir-fry sizzled in the pan. Forgotten. Mark looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in our foundation. It was not caused by my debt. It was caused by his guilt. "She's manipulating you." "Mark," I said softly. "Zoo, please," he snapped, and I flinched. She sounded awful. "Did you hear her breathing?" I heard a performance, I thought, but I swallowed the words. I walked over and touched his arm. "We will visit," I said. "We can go down for a weekend." "A weekend might be too late," he whispered, staring at his dark phone. That was the first red flag. The second one arrived 3 days later via United Parcel Service. It was a large cardboard box, battered and taped together with so much duct tape it looked like a hostage. The return address was scrawled in jagged black marker. To my grandbaby. From Grandma Patricia, the doorman. A lovely Jamaican man named Henry wrinkled his nose when he handed it to me. Miss Zoe, he said politely, you might want to open this on the balcony. So Yudzing Haoling. 2# is greater than it has a smell. I took the box. It felt damp. A distinct odor of mildew and mothballs wafted from it, assaulting my senses. I carried it up to the apartment, placing it on the floor of our pristine living room. The contrast was comical. My white buckle sofa, my abstract art, my fiddle leaf fig tree, Caoying Haoling. 2# is greater than, and this rotting cardboard cube from Virginia. Mark came home from work just as I was cutting the tape. Oh, Mom sent something, he beamed, his earlier gloom lifting. See, she is trying. Zoo, she is excited. I pulled the flaps open. The smell hit us like a physical blow. It was the scent of a basement that had not seen sunlight in 20 years. Inside, jammed haphazardly, without tissue paper or care, were piles of graying, yellowed baby clothes. Look at this, Mark said, pulling out a onesie that had a brown stain on the collar. This was mine. She kept it all these years. Mark, this is Caoying Haoling. 2 Raute ist größer als unhygienisch, I said, trying to be diplomatic. I picked up a knitted blanket. It felt greasy, and then I saw it. Movement, something dark and shiny skittered out from the folds of the blanket. It moved with that jerky, terrifying speed that triggers a primal fear in every human being. A cockroach, a German cockroach, fat and frantic. It scrambled across my hardwood floor, heading straight for the gap under the baseboards. Oh my God, I shrieked, dropping the blanket. Mark, kill it. Mark stomped on it, leaving a smear of bug guts on the floor I had just polished yesterday. I stood there, hyperventilating, clutching my stomach. I looked into the box. There were black specks at the bottom. Mouse droppings. She sent us trash. I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. She sent us a box of literal trash and pests. Mark looked at the dead roach, then at the box, then at me. His face hardened. It is not trash. Zoo, he said, his voice cold. It is sentimental. She is an old woman living alone in a big house. She probably did not see the bug. Why do you always have to assume the worst of her? I stared at him. The man who usually obsessed over the thread count of our sheets was now defending a box of biohazards. She is marking her territory. I thought, this is not a gift. It is a biological weapon. She is showing me that she can bring her filth into my sanctuary, and my husband will thank her for it. I looked at the stain on the floor. I looked at the view of Manhattan outside the window, the city lights beginning to twinkle like diamonds. I felt a sudden, chilling certainty that my life, this carefully constructed, expensive, beautiful life, was about to be dismantled, brick by brick. I'm going to take a shower, I said, my voice flat. Throw that box out. Now, Mark Zihu, clearly annoyed by my lack of gratitude, but he began dragging the box toward the door. As I stood under the hot water, scrubbing my skin until it turned red, I could not shake the feeling of the cockroach crawling on my hand. But it was not just the bug. It was the realization that the roach was just a scout. The invasion had begun, and I was the only one who knew we were at war. The silence in the apartment after Mark left for Virginia was heavy. But if I am being honest, It was also a relief. Mark had taken the Amtrak down to Richmond early Saturday morning, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a look of martyred obligation on his face. He kissed my forehead before he left, his lips cool and dry, and told me to rest. He said he would be back by Sunday night. That gave me 48 hours of solitude. 48 hours to not feel the weight of his gaze, which had recently begun to feel less like love and more like an assessment. I spent the weekend obsessively cleaning. I scrubbed the grout in the shower with a toothbrush until my knuckles were raw. I reorganized the pantry, turning all the labels of the organic pasta sauces to face forward. It was a nervous energy, a way to impose order on a physical space, because my mental space was becoming a cluttered mess. Every time I paused, my mind drifted to the spreadsheet on my laptop. $42,800. That was the remaining balance on the credit cards. I had managed to pay off a chunk recently, but the number was still suffocating. I sat on my plush, white buccal sofa, staring at the numbers, calculating interest rates and minimum payments. If I skipped lunch for 3 months, if I took on 2 extra freelance staging gigs, if I sold a few of my designer bags on the secondhand market, Saoyudzing Haoling, 2# is greater than I could maybe knock it down to 30,000 by the time the baby arrived. I was drowning in math when the front door lock beeped on Sunday evening. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under a throw pillow just as Mark walked in. He looked exhausted. His shoulders were slumped, and his clothes, usually crisp and pressed, looked rumpled. But it was not just fatigue. There was something else in his posture, a heaviness, a shadow. "Hey," I said, forcing a bright smile. I stood up to greet him. "How was the drive from the station? How is your mom?" Mark dropped his bag on the floor. He did not pick it up. He just let it sit there, a dark obstruction on the light oak floorboards. "She is dying, Zoe," he said. His voice was flat. I felt a pang of genuine sympathy, mixed with the skepticism I could not suppress. "I am so sorry, Mark," I said, reaching for his hand. "What did the doctors say? Is it confirmed?" He pulled his hand away. He walked past me to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. He stared into it for a long time, the cool blue light illuminating his face. "She looks terrible," he muttered, ignoring my question about the medical diagnosis. "She is frail. She is all alone in that massive house." "And do you know what she talked about the whole time?" I held my breath. "You? The baby?" Mark slammed the refrigerator door shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. "She talked about how much she worries about us. About me. About you living in this Saoyudzing Haoling. 2# is greater than this concrete box." I blinked. Our apartment was 2,000 square feet. It was a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was hardly a box. Mark turned to face me. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "It is so quiet down there, Zoe. You wake up and you hear birds. You smell grass. Here?" I stepped off the train and I smelled urine and exhaust. I walked 2 blocks and almost got hit by a delivery bike. "That is New York, Mark," I said gently. "We love New York." "You love New York, do I?" he challenged. "Or did I just convince myself I do because you wanted to be here?" The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. This was new. Mark had never questioned our life here. We had chosen this place together. We had toasted with champagne on the balcony the day we signed the lease. "It is not safe for a baby," he continued, his voice rising slightly. I saw a homeless man screaming at a pigeon outside the station. Is that what we want our child to see? My mom. Sao Yuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than she has 5 acres of land. Fenced in. Safe. The air is clean. I felt the first crack form in the wall of our marriage. It was hairline. Barely visible. But I knew structural damage when I saw it. Mark. I said, keeping my voice steady, we have jobs here. My career's here. Your firm is here. Jobs. He scoffed. He rubbed his face with his hands. Mom says we are slaves to our overhead. She asked me how much we pay in rent. When I told her, she actually cried. Zooey, she cried. She said we are throwing our future into a landlord's pocket when we could be building equity. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. Of course, she cried. It was a performance. A calculated emotional strike. We are fine. Mark, I said, we are managing. Are we? He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Are we really? Because Mom thinks you look stressed. She asked if we are having money trouble. She said she sensed a tension in you over the phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. The debt? Did he know? Had she guessed? I am not stressed. I lead. I am pregnant. There is a difference. Mark Sehil. A long, disappointed exhale that made me feel small. I am going to shower. He said, the city grit is all over me. I feel filthy. He walked past me, leaving the scent of stale Virginia air and doubt in his wake. The next 2 days were a blur of passive-aggressive comments. Mark started pointing out every flaw in our life. The siren wailing 3 blocks away, noise pollution, the price of organic strawberries, highway robbery, the wait for the elevator, wasted time. He was parroting her. I could hear Patricia's cadence in his voice. He was not speaking. He was channeling. Then came Tuesday evening. Mark was in the shower again. He had been taking long showers since he got back, as if he were trying to wash away his conflict. I was in the living room, folding laundry. My phone, which was resting on the coffee table, buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I usually ignored these, thinking they were telemarketers. But something compelled me to answer. Hello? Zoo? Is that you? Dear? The voice was sweet, dripping with a sugary concern that made my skin crawl. It was Patricia. Patricia, I said, stiffening. How did you get my cell number? Oh, Mark gave it to me, she said lightly. He said you would not mind. I just wanted to check on you. Sweetheart, Mark sounded so Yuting Haoling. 2 hashes greater than distraught when we spoke earlier. I frowned. You spoke to Mark today? Every day? Dear, a son needs his mother, especially when he is carrying such a heavy burden. I stopped folding a towel. What burden? Patricia Sehil. It was a theatrical, tragic sound. You, Zoe. He is worried about you. He told me about the Sao Yuting Haoling. Do dièse est supérieur à épisode. I froze. Episodes? What are you talking about? Now, there is no need to be defensive. She cooed. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. He told me about your rage, the mood swings, how you scream at him over nothing. He says he is walking on eggshells in his own home. He thinks it is prenatal psychosis. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was a lie, a complete fabrication. We had not fought. I had not raised my voice in months. He never said that. I said, my voice shaking. Mark would never say that. Oh, honey, denial is a symptom. You know, she said smoothly. He is terrified. Zoo. He told me he sometimes locks the bathroom door because he is afraid of what you might do. He thinks you are unstable. He thinks you are 小语警号令. 2# is greater than dangerous to the baby. The room spun. This was gaslighting of the highest order. She was taking my reality and twisting it into a horror movie. You are lying, I hissed. Why are you doing this? I am just trying to help, she said, her voice hardening slightly. I told him he needs to take control. For the sake of my grandchild, a sick mother cannot raise a child. Zoo, if you cannot handle your mind, maybe you should not handle the baby. Something inside me snapped. It was not a logical reaction. It was a primal defense mechanism. The accusation that I would hurt my own child, that I was crazy, hit the exact spot where my deepest insecurities lived. Shut up, I screamed into the phone. You are a poisonous, manipulative witch. Shut up, I was shaking. My vision blurred. I needed to hurt something. I needed to release the pressure building in my chest. I did not realize I had grabbed the glass of water from the table until I threw it. I hurled it across the room with all my strength. It smashed against the wall next to the hallway entrance. The sound of shattering glass was explosive. Shards rained down onto the hardwood floor, glittering like jagged diamonds. Water dripped down the pristine white paint like tears. And then, time stopped. Mark stood in the hallway entrance. He had a towel wrapped around his waist. His hair was wet. Water droplets clung to his chest. He was staring at the shattered glass. Then he looked at the water, soaking into the baseboard. Finally, he looked at me. I stood there, panting, my face flushed, my hand still raised in the follow-through of the throw. The phone was clutched in my other hand. Patricia still on the line. Mark, I whispered. He did not look angry. He looked sad. He looked resigned. It was the look of a man who had just had his worst fears confirmed. Mark, Patricia's voice came from the phone, loud and clear in the silent room. Mark, are you there? Is she doing it again? Oh God. I heard a crash. Mark, please be careful. Mark walked over to me. He gently took the phone from my hand. I am here. Mom, he said softly into the receiver, his eyes never leaving mine. Did she throw something? Patricia cried. Mark, get out of there. She is going to hurt you. It is okay. Mom, Mark said, you were right. 3 words. Just 3 words. But they hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Mark, no, I pleaded, reaching for his arm. She provoked me, she said. He stepped back, out of my reach. Zoe, look at the wall, he said. Look at the glass. It was her, I cried, tears hot and stinging in my eyes. She told me you said I was crazy. She said I was dangerous. Mark shook his head slowly. I never said that. Zoe, why would you make that up? I stared at him. He believed her. He genuinely believed that I had fabricated the conversation, that I had snapped for no reason. She is in your head. Mark, listen to me, please. Stop yelling, he whispered. Just, 小语警号令. Dve, stop. He put the phone back to his ear. I am going to go into the bedroom. Mom, yes. I will lock the door. I love you too. He turned and walked away. The bedroom door clicked shut. Then, the distinct sound of the lock turning. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the shards of my own loss of control. I looked at the wet stain on the wall. It looked like a map of a place I did not recognize, a territory where I was the villain and the woman hundreds of miles away was the savior. I sank down onto the sofa, avoiding the glass on the floor. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely clasp them together. I realized then that the debt was no longer my biggest secret. My biggest secret was that I was married to a stranger, and the woman who had birthed him had just successfully planted the first seed of my destruction. I looked at the shattered glass again. Clean it up. Dewey, I told myself. Clean it up before he comes out. If you erase the mess, maybe you can erase the moment. But as I got down on my hands and knees to pick up the sharp pieces, I knew it was too late. The glass was broken, and so was the illusion of my perfect life. The invasion began on a Thursday afternoon. Under the gray, weeping sky of a New York autumn, Mark had insisted that his mother and sister stay with us. He claimed that the hotels in Manhattan were exorbitantly priced, which was true, and that Patricia needed family around her while she sought a second opinion from a specialist at Mount Sinai Hospital. I had argued against it, citing space, citing stress, citing my pregnancy. But Mark had looked at me with those wounded puppy eyes and asked if I really wanted to turn away a dying woman. So I opened the door. They arrived with 4 large suitcases for a 3-day trip. Patricia was in a wheelchair, being pushed by Sarah, my sister-in-law. Sarah was 2 years older than Mark, with a face that looked like it was permanently etched in a sneer of dissatisfaction. She wore a tracksuit that was too tight and chewing gum with a ferocity that made my own jaw ache. Patricia looked frail, wrapped in a thick wool blanket despite the apartment being a comfortable 72 degrees. Her head lolled to the side. "Hello, Zooey," Sarah said, pushing past me without a hug or a handshake. She wheeled Patricia into the foyer, the rubber tires leaving wet streaks on the floor. Wow, must be nice to have a doorman. We had to wait 5 minutes for him to bring the luggage cart. I closed the door, shutting out the world and sealing myself in with them. "Welcome," I said, trying to infuse warmth into my voice. "How was the trip?" Patricia lifted her head slowly. Her eyes scanned the room, cataloging every piece of furniture, every vase, every painting. "It is Sawi Ting Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than lavish. Patricia Rasped. A bit cold, is it not? Not very homey. But I suppose this is how city people live." Mark rushed over. Taking his mother's hand, "I set up the guest room for you." "Mom," he said gently, "it has a view of the river." Sarah scoffed. She let go of the wheelchair handles and began wandering around the living room, picking up my crystal coasters and inspecting the bottom of them for price tags. "I will take the guest room with Mom," Sarah announced. "Mark, you can sleep on the sofa. I need to be near her in case she stops breathing in the night." I stiffened. The guest room had a queen bed. It was tight for 2 people. "Actually," I started to say, "there is an air mattress. We will manage." Sarah interrupted, dropping the coaster back onto the table with a loud clack. "Unless you want to give up the master bedroom, I am sure Mom would be more comfortable there." I looked at Mark, waiting for him to draw a boundary. He looked at the floor. "Maybe Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than Mark started. His voice hesitant. "Maybe for a few nights." "Zoo? The master bath has the walk-in tub. It would be easier for Mom." I felt the blood rushing in my ears. This was my sanctuary, my bed. "No," I said. The word came out sharper than I intended. "The guest bathroom has a walk-in shower with a bench. It is perfectly accessible." Patricia let out a long, shuddering sigh. "It is fine. Mark," she whispered, clutching her chest. "Do not fight with your wife. I do not want to be a burden. I will sleep on the floor if I have to. Of course you will not sleep on the floor, Mark said, shooting me a glare of disappointment. The guest room is fine. Sarah, let me help you with the bags. For the next 48 hours, my apartment ceased to be mine. It became a colonized territory. The air, usually scented with sandalwood and bergamot, now smelled of fried bacon, grease and menthol rub. Sarah left her makeup scattered across the bathroom vanity. Cheap, powdery compacts that dusted everything in a layer of beige. The television was on, constantly, blaring reality shows where women screamed at each other. A soundtrack to my own internal screaming. But the worst part was the surveillance. I could feel them watching me. If I checked my phone, Sarah would glance over from the sofa. If I went into my home office to work, Patricia would ask Mark why I was locking myself away from the family. She is hiding something. I heard Sarah whisper to Patricia on Friday night while I was in the kitchen making tea. People who are honest do not have locked drawers. I froze, the kettle in my hand, my home office desk, the bottom drawer. I had always kept it locked, not just because of the credit card statements, but because of client contracts and confidential blueprints. But to them, a lock was an admission of guilt. I walked into the living room. Sarah was filing her nails, looking innocent. Patricia was feigning sleep in the armchair. I am going to bed, I said, my voice tight. Good night, princess, Sarah muttered, not looking up. The explosion happened on Saturday morning. I had an emergency staging appointment in Brooklyn. A client needed a penthouse prepped for an open house immediately. I left the apartment at 8 in the morning, leaving Mark to entertain his family. I kissed him goodbye, and he barely reciprocated. His attention focused on making Patricia her special herbal tea. I rushed through the staging, my mind distracted. I kept checking my home security camera app, but the connection was down. Offline. That is strange. I thought, the wireless internet never goes down. A pit formed in my stomach, a cold, heavy stone of dread. I wrapped up the job an hour early and hailed a taxi. When I opened the front door, the silence was terrifying. The television was off. There was no smell of cooking. Mark, I called out. I walked into the living room. They were all there, sitting. It looked like a tribunal. Patricia sat in the center, on my white sofa, looking stronger and more upright than she had since she arrived. Sarah stood behind her, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smirk twisting her lips. Mark sat on the coffee table, his head in his hands, staring at a pile of papers spread out before him. My heart stopped. I recognized the papers, the blue letterhead of Chase, the red logo of Bank of America, the stack of collection notices I had hidden in the back of the file cabinet in the locked drawer. The lock on my office door had not been picked. It had been broken. I could see the wood splinters from where I stood. What is this? I whispered, dropping my purse. Mark looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears and a fury I had never seen before. You told me we were building a future, he said. His voice was quiet, deadly. You told me every bonus went into the savings. Sue, I stammered. I stepped forward. Mark, listen to me. $42,000. Mark said, picking up a statement. His hand shook, plus interest, plus late fees from 3 years ago. You have been lying to me since before we were married. It was Sarah who spoke next. She stepped forward, picking up a piece of paper like it was a piece of evidence in a murder trial. We were just looking for a stamp, she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. Mom wanted to mail a letter. We did not know you kept a den of secrets in there. We had to jimmy the lock because we thought maybe Xiaoyu Jinghao Lin 2 hash is greater than maybe you were hiding something dangerous. For the baby's sake, you broke into my desk. I said, my voice rising, that is illegal. That is my privacy. Privacy is for people who have nothing to hide. Patricia boomed. Her voice was not weak. It was thunderous. She did not look like a dying woman. She looked like a judge delivering a death sentence. She stood up. She actually stood up from the sofa without the cane, without assistance, and pointed a shaking finger at me. You are a fraud. She spat. You lured my son into this expensive life, making him pay half the rent, half the bills, while you squandered your money on Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 hash is greater than what? Shoes? Handbags? While he works himself to the bone? I did not squander it. I cried, tears hot on my face. It was debt from when I was 22. I was stupid. I have been paying it off. You have been stealing from this family. Patricia screamed. Every dollar you used to pay this debt was a dollar that should have gone to your child, to your husband. You are a financial adulterer. Zoe, I looked at Mark, begging him to defend me, begging him to see the insanity of his mother and sister breaking into our home office. Mark, please, I said. I was going to tell you. I was ashamed. I just wanted to fix it before the baby came. Mark stood up. He looked at the papers, then at the apartment, the view, the furniture. I feel like I do not know who you are, he said. His voice broke. You let me believe we were secure. You let me reject my mother's help because I thought we were independent. But we are drowning. Are we not? We are not drowning, I insisted. I handle the payments. My salary covers it. And what happens when you go on maternity leave? Sarah interjected. Who pays then? Mark? Does Mark inherit your secret debt? I opened my mouth, but no words came. That was the fear. That was the fear that had kept me awake at night. Patricia walked around the coffee table. She moved with the grace of a predator circling wounded prey. Mark, she said softly, her voice shifting from rage to a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. Look at her. Look at the panic. She knows she is caught. She is not the capable partner you thought she was. She is a liability. She put a hand on Mark's shoulder. This city, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than it eats people like her. Patricia continued. The pressure to keep up appearances, it has corrupted her, and now it is going to destroy you. You cannot raise a child in this house of lies. You cannot afford this life. Mark, not with her debt hanging over you like a guillotine. Mark looked at his mother. He looked so small, so defeated. What do I do? He whispered. Patricia smiled. It was a small, sad smile, perfectly rehearsed. We fix it, she said. We do what families do. We sacrifice. She gestured to the room, to the sweeping view of the East River. You have to sell this place. Mark, I gasped. No, this is a rental. But the lease, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than we have equity in the furniture. The deposit, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than we are not leaving New York. Hush, girl, Patricia snapped, not even looking at me. Mark, listen to me. You are bleeding money here. Between the rent and her debt, you will be bankrupt in 6 months. You need to stop the bleeding. She guided Mark back to the sofa and sat him down. Sarah sat on the other side, sandwiching him. Sell the furniture. Patricia said, break the lease. Take whatever deposit you get back. Use it to pay off her debt so the creditors do not come after you. And then, 小雨静号令, 2 hash is greater than come home. Home? Mark asked, looking up. Virginia. Patricia said, the house is big enough. You can save money. Sarah and I can help with the baby. We can rebuild your savings. We can clear this mess she made. I stood there, trembling. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. They were stripping me. They were stripping me of my home, my dignity, and my voice. All in the span of 10 minutes. Mark looked at me. His eyes were cold. Maybe she is right. Zoo, he said. I stepped back, hitting the wall. Mark, you cannot be serious. This is our life. This is a lie, Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. This apartment is a lie. Your career is a lie if it is built on debt. I cannot trust you. Sue, I cannot trust you with our finances. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. Mom is right. We need to reset. We need to go somewhere safe. I looked at Patricia. She was looking at me over Mark's shoulder. Her eyes were hard, glittering with a malice that chilled my blood. She gave me a microscopic nod. It was an acknowledgement of victory. She had found my weakness, my shame, and she had weaponized it to nuking capacity. I felt a wave of nausea. I ran to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before I retched. As I sat on the cold tile floor, wiping my mouth, I could hear them in the living room. Do not worry, honey, Patricia was saying, her voice low and comforting. We will take care of everything. We will get the realtors. We will get the movers. You just rest. Mama is here now. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and angry. I had been discovered. My secret was out. But in the darkness of that bathroom, a new realization began to form. They did not just want to help Mark. They wanted to erase me. I stood up and looked in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes red. I looked like a victim. Not yet. I thought, I am not dead yet. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back out. If we sell, I said, my voice shaky but audible. If we move to Virginia, 小雨静号令, 2 hashes greater than I have conditions. Patricia looked at me. I'm surprised by my return. You are in no position to make demands. Sarah sneered. I ignored her. I looked at Mark. I will agree to go, I said, lying through my teeth. Desperation clawing at my throat. But only until the baby is born. And only if we use the money to pay off the debt completely so we can start fresh. Mark looked at me. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. A fresh start. Patricia smiled. It was the smile of a wolf that had just been invited into the sheep pen. A fresh start, she echoed. That is all we want, dear. I knew then that I had just signed a deal with the devil, but I had no choice. I had to go into the belly of the beast to survive. The air in the apartment had changed. It no longer smelled of my lavender reed diffusers or the fresh river breeze. It smelled of impending surrender. For the next 2 days, I moved through my own home like a ghost. Patricia and Sarah had effectively annexed the living room, turning it into their command center. They spoke in hushed, excited tones, falling silent whenever I walked by to get a glass of water. Mark was their captive audience, sitting on the ottoman, nodding enthusiastically as they whispered into his ear. I tried to work in the bedroom, but my focus was shattered. Every time I looked at the door, I expected it to burst open. I felt like a prisoner waiting for the warden to deliver the verdict. On Wednesday evening, the verdict arrived. I walked out to the kitchen to make a piece of toast. My stomach had been churning with anxiety, refusing anything heavier, and found them gathered around the dining table. Patricia was holding court. In front of her lay a thick, leather-bound document. It looked ancient, the edges of the paper yellowed and soft. "Zoo, sit down," Patricia commanded. She did not ask. She ordered. I stood by the kitchen island, clutching my plate. "I am fine standing," I said. "Sit," Mark said. His voice was firm, lacking the softness I was used to. "We need to discuss the future." I pulled out a chair and sat opposite them. The distance across the marble table felt like a canyon. Patricia placed her hand on the leather document. Her fingers were gnarled, the rings on them loose, clicking against the table surface. "This," she announced, her voice trembling with reverence, "is the family legacy, the grand deed to the Oakwood estate." I frowned. I had seen photos of their house in Virginia. It was a large, drafty Victorian that had seen better days, peeling paint and overgrown hedges. It was hardly an estate. Patricia opened the folder. "My father built that house," she said, "and his father owned the land before him. 5 acres of prime Virginia soil. But what you do not know, and Mark, and what I have kept hidden until the right moment, is the true value of the land." She paused for dramatic effect. Mark leaned in, his eyes wide. "Developers have been circling for years," Patricia whispered. "They want to build a luxury golf course. The last offer we received, 10 years ago, was for $2 million. Mark gasped. $2 million? Patricia nodded solemnly. "Today, with the market the way it is easily worth $4, maybe $5 million. My interior monologue screamed bullshit. If she had land worth $5 million, why was she wearing a coat from Goodwill? Why was the house falling apart? Why did she need my husband's salary? But Mark was hooked. I could see the dollar signs spinning in his eyes. He looked at the document as if it were a holy scripture. $5 million. Mark breathed. "Mom, why did you not sell?" "Because it is family land," Patricia snapped, slamming her hand down. "We do not sell our history to strangers with golf clubs. We keep it for the bloodline." She turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were cold, calculating, reptilian. "And that is why I had the lawyers draw up a new addendum to my will last week," she said. She slid a piece of paper toward Mark. "I am leaving the estate, the land, and the house entirely to my grandson, your son, Mark." Mark picked up the paper, his hand shaking. "But," Patricia added, her voice dropping to a steel whisper, "there is a condition. The clause of continuity." I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. "What condition?" I asked. Patricia ignored me. She kept her eyes on Mark. "The child must be born on Virginia soil," she said, "and he must reside in the ancestral home for the first 5 years of his life. If these conditions are not met, the estate will be liquidated, and the proceeds will be donated to the church." It was a trap, a beautiful, golden, $5 million trap. Mark looked up from the paper. He looked at me. "Zoe," he said, his voice breathless. "Did you hear that? Our son, Sao Yu Ting Haoling, Tuhash is greater than he would be set for life. $5 million. That is Ivy League tuition. That is a trust fund. That is freedom. It is manipulation." "Mark," I said, my voice rising, "cannot you see? She is bribing you to move back." "It is not a bribe," Sarah shouted from the corner. "It is a birthright. Why do you want to rob your own child of his inheritance? Are you that selfish?" "I am not selfish," I cried. I am realistic. Who values this land at 5 million? Where is the appraisal? Does it matter? Mark cut in. Even if it is half that. Zou je ting haling. 2 hekje is groter dan Zoe. We are drowning in debt here. There. We would be royalty. We would own land. He stood up and walked over to me. He grabbed my hands. His grip was tight. Desperate. We have to do this. Zoe, we have to sell the apartment. We have to move. Not just for us, but for him. I looked into his eyes and saw a stranger. I saw a man who felt small in the big city. A man who felt emasculated by his wife's secret debt, now being offered a crown and a kingdom by his mommy. I cannot just leave my job. Mark, I pleaded. I have contracts. You can consult remotely, he argued. Or Kit, with this kind of asset in the family, you do not need to work yourself to death staging apartments for rich snobs. You can be a mother, a real mother, a real mother. The words slapped me. I pulled my hands away. No, I said. I am not signing anything. I am not moving to a house I hate based on a piece of paper I have not had a lawyer review. Patricia closed the leather folder. The sound was soft, final. She is stubborn. Mark, Patricia said softly, she would rather see you struggle in this concrete jungle than let you claim your rightful place. She does not respect you. That was the match in the powder keg. Mark turned red. The veins in his neck bulged. I am the husband, he shouted, startling me. I am the father. I get a say in where we raise our son. You lied to me about the money. Zoe, you lost your right to veto financial decisions when you hid $50,000 of debt from me. He was screaming. Spittle flew from his mouth. I backed away, bumping into the refrigerator. Mark, stop. I whispered. You are scaring me. Good, he yelled. Maybe you need to be scared. Maybe you need to wake up. We are listing this apartment tomorrow. I am calling the landlord to break the lease. We are going to Virginia. End of discussion. He stormed out of the room. Sarah followed him, shooting me a look of pure malice. Patricia remained at the table. She picked up her teacup. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes locked on mine over the rim. She did not say a word. She did not have to. She had won. The stress hit me 3 hours later. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark snoring beside me. He had fallen asleep instantly, exhausted by his own rage. I was wide awake, my mind racing, calculating escape routes, legal options, anything. Then I felt it, a sharp, twisting cramp in my lower abdomen. I gasped and sat up. It was not just a flutter. It was pain, deep, grinding pain. I threw the covers off and rushed to the bathroom. When I looked down, my heart stopped. Blood, bright, red blood on my pajamas. Mark, I screamed. I stumbled back into the bedroom, clutching my stomach. Mark, wake up. Mark groaned and rolled over. What? What is it? Something is wrong, I cried, doubling over as another wave of pain hit me. The baby. I am bleeding. Mark sat up, blinking in the darkness. Then he saw the blood on my legs. Oh my God, he whispered. He scrambled out of bed. He was frantic, pulling on his pants, looking for his phone. Mom, he yelled. Mom, help. The bedroom door flew open. Patricia stood there in her nightgown. Sarah right behind her. What is happening? Patricia demanded. She is bleeding. Mark choked out. We need to go to the hospital. Patricia looked at me. She looked at the blood. Her expression did not change. There was no horror, no sympathy, just a cold calculation. I told you, she said, shaking her head. I told you she was unstable. Her stress is poisoning the child. Shut up, I screamed at her, tears streaming down my face. Call 911. Mark grabbed me, supporting my weight. I am taking her to the emergency room, he said. The ride to the hospital was a blur of lights and sirens. I sat in the back of the Uber. The ambulance would have taken too long, clutching Mark's hand. He was pale, staring straight ahead, muttering prayers. Please, I whispered to the universe, take the house, take the job, take the money. Just do not take my son. At the emergency room, they wheeled me away. Mark tried to follow, but the nurse stopped him. Family waits here, she said firmly. I looked back at him as the doors swung shut. He looked lost, and behind him, walking into the waiting room, I saw Patricia and Sarah. They had followed in another car. Patricia was patting Mark's back, whispering in his ear again. Even here, in the midst of tragedy, she was working on him. I woke up 6 hours later. The room was quiet and dim. A monitor beeped rhythmically beside me. My body felt heavy, drugged. I moved my hand and felt my stomach. It was still there, still round. A doctor was standing at the foot of the bed. A kind-looking woman with glasses. Is the baby okay? I croaked. My throat was dry as sandpaper. The baby is fine, she said gently. You had a threatened miscarriage. It was a close call. Your blood pressure was dangerously high. Extreme stress, dehydration. I closed my eyes and let out a sob of relief. But the doctor continued, her voice serious. You are high risk now. Zoe, you need absolute bed rest for the next 2 weeks. No work, no stress, no travel. You need to stay horizontal. I nodded weakly. Anything. I will do anything. The door opened. Mark walked in. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. His eyes were hollow. Hey, he whispered. He is okay. Mark, I said, tears leaking from my eyes. The baby is okay. Mark let out a breath and slumped into the chair beside the bed. He took my hand. Thank God, he said. We sat in silence for a moment. I thought, this is it. This is the wake-up call. He nearly lost his son. He will see that the stress of his mother, the fighting, the pressure to move, it almost killed our baby. Mark, I said softly, we cannot keep doing this. The fighting, the pressure, the doctor said it was stress. I know, Mark said. He looked down at our joined hands. We need to send them home. I said, I need peace. I need to stay in bed. Mark did not look up. He rubbed his thumb over my knuckles. I know you need peace. Zoe, he said. That is why I handled it. Handled what? I asked, a sudden chill running through my intravenous line. While you were sedated, Mark said, his voice steady but quiet. I went back to the apartment. I met with the landlord. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. The monitor beeped faster. Beep, beep, beep. Mark, what did you do? I broke the lease. Zoe, the words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I agreed to vacate by the end of the month. He continued, finally looking me in the eyes. I paid the penalty fee. I listed the furniture on Facebook Marketplace. Sarah is already coordinating the movers. No, I whispered. You cannot do that without me. It is done. Mark said. I signed the papers. I told the landlord about your financial situation. about the medical emergency. He was understanding. He wants us out so he can renovate. He squeezed my hand tighter, as if trying to restrain me. This is for the best. Zooey, you almost lost the baby because of the stress of this city. Because of the debt, we are going to Virginia. Mom is arranging a medical transport for you so you can travel lying down. You are kidnapping me, I said, my voice rising in panic. You are forcing me to leave my home. I am saving our family, Mark snapped, his facade cracking. Look at you. You are in a hospital bed. You cannot work. You cannot pay the bills. We have no choice. Zooey, he stood up, looming over me. We are moving. The apartment is gone. There is no home here for you to go back to. I stared at him, the man I loved, the father of my child. He had taken advantage of my unconscious state to burn my life to the ground. The door opened again. Patricia peeked in. Is she awake? She asked sweetly. She walked in, followed by Sarah. Patricia looked at me, lying helpless in the bed, tethered to machines. She looked at Mark, who was trembling with the adrenaline of his betrayal. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. Do not worry, Zooey, Patricia said, patting my leg through the blanket. We will take care of everything. You just rest. You are ours now. I looked at the ceiling tiles. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was trapped. I had no home. I had no money accessible to me. I was physically unable to move without risking my child's life. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. You win, Patricia. I thought, round 1 goes to you. But as I lay there, listening to them discuss the logistics of packing my clothes, a cold, hard knot formed in the center of my chest. It was not fear anymore. It was hatred, pure, crystallized hatred. Take me to Virginia. I thought, take me to your crumbling house. But remember this, you are bringing the enemy inside the gates. The journey to Virginia felt less like a relocation and more like an extradition. I traveled in the back of a private medical transport van, strapped to a gurney like a criminal or a corpse. Mark sat up front with the driver, staring out at the passing highway, while Patricia and Sarah followed in their car behind us. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of anxiety through my body, not for myself, but for the fragile life clinging to existence inside my womb. We arrived at dusk. The sky was a bruised purple, casting long, distorted shadows across the landscape. Welcome home, Mark said, opening the back doors. I raised my head slightly to look. The Oakwood estate. The name conjured images of manicured lawns and white pillars. The reality was a Gothic nightmare. The house sat on a hill, a sprawling Victorian beast with peeling gray paint that looked like dead skin. The porch sagged on the left side. The famous 5 acres were overgrown with knee-high weeds and tangled briars that choked the ancient oak trees. It looks, Sao Yu Jing Hao, lean. 2 hash is greater than rustic, Mark said, his voice faltering slightly as he took in the disrepair. It just needs a little love. It needs a bulldozer, I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. The paramedics wheeled me up the ramp, a rickety wooden structure that bent under the weight of the gurney. The air smelled of wet earth and stagnation. Patricia met us at the door. She stood on the threshold like the gatekeeper of the underworld, her face flushed with victory. Bring her in, she commanded. Be careful with my grandson. They wheeled me into the foyer. It was dark and smelled intensely of lemon polish, masking the scent of old dust and dry rot. Take her to the back room, Patricia instructed the paramedics. I frowned. The back room? Mark. I whispered, "Where are we sleeping?" Mark looked at his mother. "Mum, I thought we would take the master suite upstairs. It has the best light." Patricia shook her head, her face a mask of tragic concern. "Oh, honey, we cannot carry her up those stairs. They are steep and narrow. What if she trips? What if she needs water in the night?" "No," the doctor said, "bed rest. She stays on the ground floor." It made sense logically, but my gut screamed that this was a demotion. The paramedics pushed me down a narrow hallway, past the kitchen, to a door at the very back of the house. They wheeled me inside. It was a storage room. There was no other word for it. It was small, barely 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were covered in wood paneling that had darkened with age. There was a single, small window high up on the wall, covered by a grate. The floor was cold linoleum. Pushed against the wall was a twin-size bed with a sagging mattress. "Mom?" Mark asked, looking around the dismal space. "This is Sayu Ling. 2# is greater than tight. It is the warmest room in the house." Patricia lied smoothly, "And it is right next to the kitchen so I can hear her if she calls. It is for her safety." "Mark, do you want her climbing stairs?" Mark looked at me. "Turn. It is only for a few weeks." "Zul," he said, trying to convince himself, "until you are off bed rest." I lay on the narrow bed, the springs squeaking in protest. I felt like a discarded piece of furniture. "Where will you sleep?" I asked Mark. "Oh, I will be upstairs in my old room." Mark said, "The bed here is too small for two. I need to get good sleep so I can start fixing up the house tomorrow." So I was to be isolated, separated from my husband. "And Sarah?" I asked. I heard a thud from upstairs, heavy footsteps, the sound of furniture being dragged. "Sarah is in the master suite," Patricia said, smiling. "She needs the space for her." Sayu Ling. 2# is greater than projects. And since you sold your furniture, we moved your remaining things, the nice dresser, the vanity, into her room. It seemed a shame to leave them in storage. My blood ran cold. They had taken my furniture, the pieces I had curated with my employee discount, the pieces I loved. Sarah was upstairs, nesting in my luxury, while I lay in a glorified closet. "I am tired," I said, turning my face to the wall. "Please leave." I heard them leave. The door clicked shut. I was alone in the semi-darkness, staring at a water stain on the paneling that looked like a skull. The next morning, the financial guillotine fell. I woke up to the smell of bacon. My stomach rumbled. I reached for my phone to check the time, but it was not on the nightstand. I patted the blankets. Nothing. The door opened. Patricia walked in, carrying a tray with a plate of scrambled eggs and a piece of burnt toast. She did not bring my phone. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," she chirped. "Where is my phone?" I asked, sitting up slowly. Patricia set the tray down on my lap. "Mark has it," she said. "We decided, Mark and I, that you need a digital detox. No screens, no stress, no checking bank accounts or work emails, just peace." I stared at her. This was not care. This was confinement. "I need my phone, Patricia. I need to call my parents. You can use the house landline in the kitchen if you really need to," she said breezily. "But right now, we need to discuss logistics." She pulled a chair over and sat down. Her demeanor shifted. The sweet grandmother vanished, replaced by the shark I had seen in New York. She held out her hand. "I need your wallet." "Zoe," I froze. Excuse me? Your wallet, she repeated. Your credit cards, your debit card. Why? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Because you are an addict, she said calmly. I gasped. I am not an addict. You are a spending addict. She corrected. You have $50,000 of debt to prove it. You cannot be trusted with money. Mark is busy repairing the roof today. I am going to the grocery store to buy food for you. I need your card. No, I said firmly. Ask Mark for money. Mark does not have any money. Sui, she said, her eyes narrowing. He emptied his savings to pay the penalty for breaking your lease. He paid the movers. He is tapped out until his next paycheck. You are the one with the credit line. She leaned forward. Do you want to eat? Do you want your baby to get nutrients? Or do you want to starve because you are too selfish to share? I looked at the tray of food. I looked at her outstretched hand. If I refused, she would starve me, or worse. She would go to Mark and tell him I was refusing to contribute to the household, that I was hoarding money while he worked like a dog. I reached under my pillow where I had hidden my clutch the night before. I pulled out my wallet. My hands shook as I pulled out my Visa card. I want the receipt, I said, my voice icy, every single penny accounted for. Patricia snatched the card from my hand. She smiled. Do not worry. Dear, I am very good at budgeting. She stood up and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. Oh, and the PIN for the debit card? In case the credit card is maxed out. I hesitated. Zoe, she warned, do not make this difficult. Mark is very stressed today. He does not need you causing a scene. I gave her the PIN. 1992. Thank you, she said. Enjoy your eggs. She closed the door. I heard the lock click. They had locked me in. I sat there, the plate of cold eggs on my lap, and I felt something inside me break. But it was not a break of despair. It was the breaking of a dam. For months, I had been operating out of guilt. Guilt for my debt, guilt for my past, guilt for not being the perfect wife. I had let that guilt make me small. I had let it silence my intuition. But taking my wallet, locking me in a room, using my baby as leverage, that was not family. That was war. I pushed the tray aside. I stood up, ignoring the dizziness. I walked to the window and looked out through the grate. I could see the overgrown yard. I could see Mark on a ladder in the distance, scraping paint off the siding. He looked small and pathetic, a puppet dancing on his mother's strings. I was not safe here. My child was not safe here. I needed allies. And since my husband had defected to the enemy, I needed to hire one. I went to the door and tried the handle. Locked. I went to the closet in the corner of the room. It was filled with old winter coats that smelled of mothballs. I patted down the pockets. Nothing. Then I remembered the go bag. When we lived in New York, Mark was paranoid about emergencies. He had packed a small duffel bag with essentials, flashlights, batteries, a first aid kit, and insisted we keep it near the door. In the chaos of the move, I had seen the movers shove it into the bottom of the wardrobe box that was currently sitting in the corner of this room. Unopened, I scrambled over to the box. I tore open the tape. I dug through sweaters and shoes until I felt the canvas strap of the duffel. I pulled it out. I unzipped it. Flashlight, bandages, water bottle, and there, tucked in the side pocket, was an old burner phone, a prepaid Nokia that Mark had bought 3 years ago in case the cell towers go down. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. Battery low, but it had a signal. 1 bar. I did not call my parents. they would just panic and call Mark. I did not call the police. This was a civil matter. They would say it was a domestic dispute, and Patricia would talk her way out of it. I needed dirt. I needed leverage. I sat on the floor, hiding in the narrow space between the bed and the wall. I used the slow, clunky browser to search for Private Investigators, Richmond, Virginia. A list popped up. I clicked on the third one, Sterling Investigations, specializing in asset recovery and fraud. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Sterling Investigations. A gruff male voice answered. I need to hire you, I whispered, watching the door. Immediately. Who is this? My name is Zooey. I am being held against my will in a house in Sauitzing-Haling. 2# is greater than I paused, realizing I did not know the exact address. In the Oakwood estate. The man on the other end laughed dryly. The old Miller place? I know it. Who is holding you? My mother-in-law, I said. And my husband? Listen. Lady, if you are kidnapped, call 911. No, I hissed. It is complicated. They have my financial access. They are manipulating my husband. They claim this land is worth $5 million. The man went silent. $5 million? He repeated. For the Miller place? Yes. They are using an inheritance clause to keep us here. I need to know the truth about the land. I need to know the truth about her finances. I need to know everything she is hiding. I have money. I added quickly. I have a separate savings account they do not know about yet. I can wire you a retainer. There was a pause. I could hear the click of a lighter on the other end. All right, the man said. My name is Frank. 500 for the retainer. I will start digging. What is the mother-in-law's name? Patricia Miller, I said. And her daughter, Sarah. I will get back to you, Frank said. Keep that phone hidden. I hung up. I buried the phone deep inside the lining of the mattress, cutting a small slit in the fabric with my fingernail to slide it in. I lay back down on the bed. My heart was hammering, but my mind was clear. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open. Patricia's voice drifted down the hallway. Oh, Sarah, look at what I got. Fresh salmon for us. And some lovely wine. And for Zoo? Sarah asked. Oh, just some saltines and broth. Patricia laughed. We have to be careful with her stomach. I stared at the ceiling. The old Sue, the guilty Zoe, would have cried. She would have felt hurt by the cruelty. But the new Zoe, I felt a cold smile touch my lips. Drink your wine. Patricia, I thought, enjoy the salmon bought with my money, because every swipe of that card is leaving a digital trail that Frank is going to follow straight to your grave. I closed my eyes. I was no longer a victim waiting for the slaughter. I was a spy behind enemy lines, and I was going to burn this house down. Not with fire, but with the truth. Time in the storage room did not pass in hours or minutes. It passed in the shifting angles of the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light from the high window. It passed in the rhythmic thud of Mark's boots on the floorboards above me. A constant reminder that my husband was walking freely while I rotted in his childhood dungeon. 3 days had passed since I arrived at the Oakwood estate. 3 days of saltines and lukewarm broth delivered by Sarah, who always wore a smirk that suggested she had spit in the bowl. 3 days of Mark stopping by for 5 minutes in the evening, smelling of sawdust and sweat, telling me how great the progress was, how the house was coming together, how happy his mother was. He never looked me in the eye. On the 4th afternoon, the silence of the house was broken by the vibration of the mattress. I froze. It was the burner phone. I waited until I heard the heavy clunk of the washing machine starting down the hall. Patricia doing laundry. Before I slid my hand into the slit I had cut in the mattress. The Nokia was warm. I answered in a whisper. Hello? Zooey? It is Frank. The gruff voice of the private investigator was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Frank? I breathed. Please tell me you found something. I found everything, he said. His voice was grim. Are you sitting down? I am lying down. I said, I am always lying down. Listen to me carefully. Frank said, I pulled the property records for the Oakwood estate. I pulled the tax liens. I ran a credit check on Patricia Miller and Sarah Miller. He paused. The sound of papers rustling on the other end. There is no $5 million estate. Zoe, I closed my eyes. I knew it. What is there? I asked. There is a corpse of a house. Frank said bluntly. Patricia took out a second mortgage on the property in 2008. She took out a third mortgage, a high-interest predatory loan. 6 months ago, she owes the bank $450,000. The house is currently valued at maybe $300,000 in its current condition. She is underwater, deep. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were not just poor, they were drowning. And the inheritance? I asked. The clause of continuity? Frank snorted. It is a fairy tale. I checked the probate court records. Her husband left her the house outright when he died. There is no trust. There is no restriction on selling. That document she showed you, she probably typed it up on Microsoft Word herself. It has zero legal standing. I gripped the phone tighter. So why? Why drag us here? Why the elaborate lie about the baby needing to be born here? Because of the foreclosure? Frank said. The word hung in the damp air of the storage room. Foreclosure? The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings 2 months ago. Frank explained. The auction is set for 90 days from now, unless she comes up with a significant lump sum to bring the loan current. She is going to be homeless. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a picture so ugly I wanted to vomit. My apartment, I whispered, the lease penalty, the security deposit, the furniture sales. Exactly, Frank said. She needed cash. Fast. She needed to bleed your husband dry to pay the arrears on the mortgage to stall the bank. But that is not enough. Mark's savings might cover a month or two, but she needs a steady stream. And my credit cards. I realized she took my wallet. She is buying groceries and wine, furniture. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than she is living off my credit line because her own credit is shot. It gets worse. Zoe, how can it get worse? I looked into Sarah. Frank continued. She has a record, petty theft, check fraud, and Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than she lost custody of her own kids 3 years ago. The state took them. Unfit environment. My hand flew to my stomach. My baby, Zooey, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave. These women are desperate grifters. You are not a guest. You are a host. They are parasites. You need to get out of there. I cannot, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I am on bed rest. If I move, I bleed. If I bleed, I lose my son. Then you need to get smart. Frank said, I will email the full report to an address of your choosing. Do not let them know you know. Not yet. If you corner a rat, it bites. I understand. I said, thank you, Frank. I hung up and shoved the phone back into the mattress. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The water stain looked less like a skull now and more like a map of my own stupidity. I had married a man who was so blinded by his need for mommy's approval that he had led his wife and unborn child into a trap. The tragedy was not the money. Money could be earned back. The tragedy was that Mark was not the victim I thought he was. He was the vehicle, and he was driving us off a cliff. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Mark had gone into town to pick up supplies. I could hear the murmur of voices from the kitchen. Patricia and Sarah. A sudden, sharp craving for water hit me. My pitcher was empty. Sarah had not refilled it since morning. I sat up. My head spun for a moment, but I steadied myself. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. Quiet. I told myself, be a ghost. I stood up. The floor was cold against my bare feet. I crept to the door. I turned the handle slowly. It was unlocked. They had gotten sloppy. They assumed I was too weak, too cowed to leave my cell. I opened the door a crack. The hallway was dark. Light spilled from the kitchen doorway, 10 feet away. The smell of roasted chicken wafted out, a stark contrast to the broth I had been fed. I took a step, then another. I reached the edge of the kitchen door frame and pressed my back against the wall. Sao Yu, Ting Hao, Ling. 2. So easy. Sarah was saying. Her mouth sounded full. I cannot believe he actually signed the power of attorney. He trusts his mother. Patricia's voice purred. It was a sound of deep, self-satisfied contentment. Mark has always been soft. He wants to be the hero. I just gave him a cape. I held my breath. Power of attorney? Mark had signed a power of attorney. And the girl? Sarah asked. She is starting to look pale. Like, really pale. Let her rot. Patricia said. The doctor said bed rest. We are just following orders. I heard the clink of a wine glass being set down. What happens after the baby comes? Sarah asked. That is the part I do not get. Once she pops the kid out, she is going to want to leave. She is going to want her cards back. Patricia laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Sarah, use your head. Why do you think I have been telling Mark she is mentally unstable? Why do you think I told the neighbors she was having episodes? I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. We are building a case. Dear, Patricia continued, postpartum psychosis. It is a very tragic condition. New mothers snap. They become a danger to themselves and the infant. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they would hear it. We will call Child Protective Services, Patricia said casually, as if discussing the weather. We will report that she is neglecting the child, that she is hallucinating. We will have Mark back us up. He already believes she is crazy. Remember the glass she threw in New York? I squeezed my eyes shut. The glass, the trap she had set weeks ago. And then? Sarah asked. And then? Mark gets full custody. Patricia said. And since Mark has to work to pay off the mortgage, who raises the baby? We do. Sarah said. Exactly. We get the baby. We get the state benefits for kinship care. And so, she gets a one-way ticket to a facility, or she gets kicked out on the street with a restraining order. Either way, she is gone, and we keep the house. We keep the money. We keep the baby. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. It was not just a financial scam. It was an extraction. They were going to harvest my child and discard me like a husk. And Mark? Sarah asked. Will he go for it? He still loves her. I think Mark will do what he is told, Patricia said coldly. He always has. I will cry. I will tell him Zoe tried to hurt the baby. I will tell him she threatened me. He will choose his mother. He always chooses his mother. That was the dagger. That was the sentence that severed the last thread of hope I had for my marriage. He always chooses his mother. I backed away. I moved silently, my feet numb, my body trembling with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. I made it back to the room. I closed the door. I crawled back into the bed. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin. I did not cry. The time for tears had passed. I lay there in the dark, and I felt something inside me die. The Zoe who wanted to be liked died. The Zoe who wanted to keep the peace died. The Zoe who loved Mark. Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than she did not die, but she went into a coma. In her place, something else woke up. I thought about the baby growing inside me. My son, they wanted to turn him into a meal ticket. They wanted to raise him in this house of lies, with a grandmother who was a predator and a father who was a coward. I touched my stomach, not over my dead body. I whispered to the darkness, and certainly not over yours. I heard the front door open. Mark was home. Hey, I heard him call out cheerfully. I got the supplies, and I got a treat for Zoe. I heard him walk down the hall. He opened the door to my room. Zoe, he whispered, are you awake? I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. He walked over to the bed. He placed something on the nightstand. I love you, he whispered. We are going to be happy here. You will see. He kissed my forehead. I did not move. I did not flinch. But inside, I recoiled. His kiss felt like a brand. It was the kiss of Judas. He left the room, closing the door softly. I opened my eyes. I looked at the nightstand. It was a chocolate bar. A cheap, convenience store chocolate bar. That was his offering. He had sold our home, stolen my financial independence, and delivered me into the hands of monsters who planned to steal my child. Xiao Jinghao Lin, 2# is greater than, and he brought me a $1 chocolate bar. I reached out and grabbed the chocolate. I crushed it in my fist until the wrapper crinkled loudly in the silence. I would not eat it. I would not eat anything from this house again unless I saw it opened. The tragedy was complete. The illusion was gone. I was alone in a hostile territory, with no allies but a voice on a burner phone. But they had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. They thought I was weak because I was pregnant. They thought I was vulnerable because I was isolated. They forgot what a mother does when her young are threatened. I reached into the mattress and pulled out the phone again. I needed to send one more text to Frank. My fingers flew across the keypad. I need a lawyer, one who specializes in fraud and emergency custody. And Frank, I need you to find out who holds the mortgage on this house. I need the name of the bank officer. I hit send. The screen glowed in the darkness, illuminating my face. If anyone had seen me then, they would not have seen a victim. They would have seen the villain they were so afraid I would become. You want a villain, Patricia? I thought, I will give you a villain. I lay back and waited for the morning. The tragedy was over. The war had just begun. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity that felt almost chemical. The fear that had been paralyzing me for weeks had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was no longer a pregnant woman trapped in a storage room. I was an actress preparing for the performance of a lifetime. I lay in bed for an hour, rehearsing my lines. I practiced the tremor in my voice. I practiced the downward cast of my eyes. I practiced the posture of a beaten woman who was desperate to buy her way back into the pack. My phone, the burner Nokia hidden in the mattress, vibrated once. It was a text from Frank. The courier will be there at 4 o'clock. He is a notary I trust. He knows the drill. He will say he is from the Richmond Estate Trust. The documents are exactly as we discussed. Do not let them read the clause 4B on the 3rd page too carefully. I deleted the text. I hid the phone. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. I needed to look the part. I went to the small bathroom down the hall. I washed my face, but I did not put on makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes. I wanted them to see the exhaustion. I wanted them to see the defeat. I put on a loose, comfortable dress, one that emphasized my pregnancy. I walked into the kitchen at 10 o'clock. The atmosphere was festive. Sarah was making pancakes, humming to herself. Patricia was sitting at the table, reading a local newspaper and circling coupons with a red pen. Mark was outside, unsuccessfully trying to start an old lawnmower. Well, look who decided to join the living, Sarah said, flipping a pancake with a little too much aggression. Patricia looked up over her reading glasses. Her eyes scanned me, looking for signs of rebellion. How are we feeling today? Zoo? She asked. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were measuring me for a coffin. I walked over to the table and gripped the back of a chair. I let my hands shake visibly. I need to talk to everyone, I said. My voice was quiet. Arospi, can you call Mark in? Patricia put down her pen. Is something wrong with the baby? No, I said. It is about Soiting 2# is greater than it is about money. The word hung in the air like the scent of blood in shark-infested waters. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. Sarah stopped flipping the pancakes. I will get Mark, Sarah said, abandoning the stove. 2 minutes later, they were all seated around the scratched oak table. Mark wiped grease from his hands onto his jeans. Looking anxious, Patricia sat at the head of the table, her hands folded like a judge. Sarah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, chewing her gum. I took a deep breath. I looked at my hands. I have been lying to you. I began. Mark Sihil, a sound of deep exhaustion. Zui, if this is about the credit cards again, Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, R Jinghao Dayu. It is not about debt, I interrupted. It is about assets. Silence. Absolute silence. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. What do you mean? Patricia asked, her voice sharpening. I looked up, meeting Mark's eyes. I summoned tears. It was not hard. The hormones and the situation made them readily available. When my grandmother passed away 5 years ago, everyone thought she left everything to my parents. I lied, but she did not. She had a separate policy, a life insurance policy, and a small trust fund that she left directly to me. She told me to keep it for a rainy day, to keep it secret in case I ever got married, and Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than, and things went wrong. I saw Mark flinch. The insult landed, but the curiosity was stronger. How much? Sarah asked. She did not even try to hide her greed. I hesitated, playing the reluctance perfectly. $1 million. I whispered. The reaction was visceral. Mark's jaw dropped. Sarah choked on her gum. Patricia sat perfectly still, but her pupils dilated. 1 million? Mark repeated. You have $1 million? And you let me sweat over rent? You let me worry about the medical bills? You let me bring us here because I thought we were broke? I know. I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. I know. Mark, I was scared. I was selfish. I have been so protective of my own security that I almost destroyed our family. I looked at Patricia, but lying in that room, Sao Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than almost losing the baby. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than. It made me realize what matters. I do not want to hold on to this secret anymore. I want to help. I want to fix this. Patricia leaned forward. The predator had smelled the weakness. Fix it how? Dear? She asked softly. I wiped my eyes. I want to use the money to restore the Oakwood estate. I said, I want to build the nursery Mark talked about. I want to pay off the mortgage so we are not. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than, so we are not burdened. I want to invest in this family. Mark reached across the table and took my hand. Zoe. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than. That is. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than. That is incredible. $1 million? We could do everything. We could fix the roof, the foundation. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than everything. Sarah walked over to the table, her eyes gleaming. So, where is it? She asked. Is it in a bank account? Can you transfer it? I pulled my hand away from Mark. This was the pivot point, the trap. That is the problem, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. It isn't a trust. My grandmother was very specific. The funds can only be released for 2 reasons: medical emergency or Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than real estate investment. I looked at Patricia. I called the trustee this morning. That is who I was on the phone with. I told him I wanted to put the money into this house. He said he can approve the release of funds immediately. The full $1 million. But there is a legal requirement. What requirement? Patricia asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. Since the house is not in my name, I said, I cannot just pay for repairs. The trust views that as a gift, which is taxable and violates the terms. To release the money as an investment, I need to have a secured interest in the property. I saw Patricia stiffen. What kind of interest? She asked. The trustee said, it is just a formality, I said quickly, waving my hand as if it were trivial. He called it a renovation lien or a joint venture deed. Basically, it just states that the money is going into the house. So if the house is ever sold in the distant future, the trust gets a record of it. It does not take the house away from you, Patricia. It just, Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than attaches the investment to the property, so the lawyers are happy. I looked at Mark. It is the only way to unlock the money. Mark, otherwise, it sits there until I am 65. Mark looked at his mother. Mom, it makes sense. It is just paperwork. $1 million. Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than we could pay off the loan you were worried about. Patricia was silent. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was smart, but she was also desperate. Frank had told me the foreclosure auction was 90 days away. She needed money, and she needed it now. She had been planning to bleed us dry slowly, over years, using the baby as leverage. But here I was, offering her a winning lottery ticket on a silver platter. Who draws up this? Sao Yu Jing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than paperwork? Patricia asked. The trustee is sending a notary this afternoon. I said, he wants to get it done so he can wire the funds by Monday. He is in a rush to close his books for the quarter. Patricia tapped her fingernails on the table. Click, click, click. She looked at me. She looked at the peeling paint in the hallway. She looked at Sarah, who was practically vibrating with excitement. $1 million, Patricia murmured. We could buy new cars, Sarah whispered. We could landscape the yard. Patricia looked back at me. Her eyes were cold. searching for the lie, but I had layered the lie with the truth of my own past deceit. She believed I was capable of hiding money because I had hidden debt. It fit her profile of me. Fine, Patricia said. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Fine? I asked. If the papers are standard, Patricia said, I will read them. If they just acknowledge the investment, I will sign, but the house remains in my name. So, I am the matriarch. Of course, I said, bowing my head submissively. I do not want the house. Patricia, I hate this house. Sayutsing Haling. 2 hash is greater than, I am not a country person. I just want to make it safe for your grandson. Good, she said. She stood up. Have the notary come. The hours between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock were the longest of my life. I went back to my room, claiming I needed to rest. In reality, I was pacing the small space. 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. I texted Frank. She took the bait. At 4 sharp, the doorbell rang. I walked out to the foyer. Mark was already there. Opening the door, a man in a sharp gray suit stood on the porch. He held a leather briefcase. He looked efficient, boring, and bureaucratic. Exactly what Frank had ordered. Mrs. Miller? He asked, looking at me. I am Zhu, I said. This is my mother-in-law, Patricia Miller. She owns the property. Patricia walked into the foyer, wearing her best cardigan. She had applied lipstick. Come in, she said imperiously. We can use the dining room. We sat around the table again. The notary, his name was Mr. Henderson, according to his badge, opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents. They were thick, bound with blue legal backers. I need to explain the nature of these documents, Mr. Henderson said, his voice a monotone drone. This is a release of funds authorization coupled with a security instrument. It confirms that Zoe Miller is injecting capital into the property located at 1400 Oakwood Lane. He handed a copy to Patricia, one to Mark, and one to me. Patricia put on her glasses. She began to read. I watched her eyes scan the lines. My heart was thumping so hard I felt dizzy. Clause 1. Definition of funds. Sayutsing Haling. 2 hash is greater than Clause 2. Purpose of renovation. Sayutsing Haling. R. Zinghao Dayu. She flipped the page. So, this says the money goes into a joint account? She asked. Yes, Mr. Henderson said. A controlled disbursement account. You and Mrs. Zoe will both have signing authority to pay contractors. Patricia smiled. She liked that. She thought she could bully me into signing checks for whatever she wanted. She flipped to page 3. This was the kill zone. Clause 4. Security interest. Patricia frowned. This language, Sayutsing Haling. 2. Lionholder has right of cure? Mr. Henderson nodded, looking bored. Standard boilerplate. Ma'am, it just means if you forget to pay the property taxes or the insurance, the trust has the right to pay them for you to protect the investment. It is to prevent the asset from being seized by the state. Patricia nodded. That sounded like a benefit. Someone else to pay the bills if she forgot. And this? Patricia pointed to a paragraph at the bottom. Confession of judgment? Mr. Henderson glanced at his watch. Ma'am, these are standard terms for any construction, loan, or equity injection. It simply expedites the legal process if there is a dispute about the quality of the renovations. It protects everyone. Patricia hesitated. She looked at the document. It was dense. It was legal. It was boring. She looked at me. I was chewing my lip, looking terrified. I, Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I do not know. Patricia, I stammered. Maybe we should not. It is a lot of paperwork. Maybe I should just tell the trustee to wait. We can just... Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hashes greater than patch the roof with tarps for now. I started to reach for the papers to pull them away. No, Sarah shouted. She grabbed Patricia's arm. Mom, to sign it. It is $1 million. Do not let her back out. Patricia looked at my hand, reaching for the papers. She saw my hesitation as cowardice. She saw my reluctance as a desire to keep the money for myself. She slapped my hand away. Do not be childish. Zhu, Patricia snapped. We are doing this. She picked up the pen. She signed, Patricia Marie Miller. Then she passed it to Mark. Mark signed without reading a word. Then she passed it to me. I took the pen. I felt the cool metal against my sweaty fingers. I signed. Mr. Henderson took the papers back. He stamped them with his notary seal. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed in the dining room like a gavel. Congratulations. Mr. Henderson said, I will file these with the county clerk tomorrow morning. The funds should be released into the joint account within 48 hours. He packed up his briefcase and left. As the door closed behind him, the tension in the room broke. Sarah let out a squeal of delight. We are rich, she screamed. Patricia took off her glasses. She looked at me with a smug, victorious smile. You did the right thing. Zhu, she said condescendingly. Finally, you are finally contributing to this family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had called me crazy, who had sent me cockroaches, who had planned to steal my child. I smiled back. It was the first genuine smile I had given her in weeks. I am glad you think so. Patricia, I said, I am very tired. I am going to go rest. I walked back to my storage room. I closed the door. I locked it. I sat on the bed and pulled out the burner phone. They signed. I texted Frank. File it. Frank replied instantly. On it, by noon tomorrow. That lien will be recorded. You now own the debt. You are the priority creditor. And with that confession of judgment clause she ignored, you can foreclose on her instantly if she defaults on the existing mortgage terms, which she already has. I put the phone down. I lay back on the pillow. I did not feel relief yet. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. They thought they had just signed a receipt for $1 million. In reality, Patricia had just signed a document acknowledging that the investment was a senior lien. She had unknowingly agreed that I was now the holder of her debt. The trust was a shell company Frank had set up. The $1 million did not exist in cash. It existed as a line of credit backed by the very assets I was seizing. But the sweetest part was the confession of judgment. It was a legal nuclear weapon. By signing it, she had waived her right to a trial or a defense if I called in the debt. She had handed me the gavel. I listened to them celebrating in the kitchen. I heard the pop of a cork, likely one of the expensive bottles of wine bought with my credit card. Drink up, I thought, enjoy the party, because tomorrow, the hangover is going to be fatal. The confrontation had happened, but they did not even know they had been in a fight. They thought they had sheared the sheep. They did not realize they had just walked into the slaughterhouse. I closed my eyes and placed my hand on my stomach. You are safe now, little one. I whispered, Mommy just bought the castle. My son was born at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. He did not wait for the perfect moment or the right environment. He arrived with a ferocity that matched my own newfound resolve. The labor was short, is violent, and terrifying. Mark drove the old sedan he had borrowed from his mother. his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. We barely made it to the county hospital before I was crowning. When the nurse placed him on my chest, "Slick," I read, and screaming, I felt a shift in the tectonic plates of my soul. He was small, weighing only 6 pounds and 4 ounces, but he felt heavier than the entire world. I named him Leo, a lion, because he would need to be one to survive this family. Mark cried. He wept openly, kissing my sweaty forehead, whispering that everything was going to be perfect, that we were a real family now. I looked at him, and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a cold, clinical detachment. He was no longer my husband. He was a liability I had to manage. We stayed in the hospital for 2 days. They were the most peaceful 48 hours I had experienced in months. But discharge day came inevitably, like a sentencing hearing. We pulled into the driveway of the Oakwood estate at noon. The sun was high and bright, casting a harsh light on the peeling paint and the weeds. Patricia and Sarah were waiting on the porch. They did not look like excited relatives. They looked like bouncers at a club. Patricia stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. Sarah was pacing, smoking a cigarette, flicking the ash onto the porch steps. Mark parked the car. "Look, they are waiting for us," he said, oblivious as always. I unbuckled my seatbelt. I checked the back seat to make sure Leo was secure in his carrier. "I am going to bring him in," Mark said, reaching for the door handle. "No," I said sharply. "I will carry him." I got out of the car. My body was sore, stitches pulling with every movement, but adrenaline acted as a powerful anesthetic. I walked up the ramp, clutching the car seat. "Welcome home," Patricia said. She did not smile. She blocked the doorway. "Let me see my grandson," she commanded. I did not move. "He is sleeping." Mark came up behind me, carrying the diaper bag. "Mom, he is beautiful. You have to see him. We will have plenty of time to see him," Patricia said. She looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. "But first, we need to have a conversation." "Zoe, you are not going inside." Mark froze. "What?" I stood perfectly still. I had expected this. Sarah stepped forward, tossing her cigarette butt into the dry grass. "We talked to the social worker, Zhu," Sarah lead, her voice dripping with venom. "We told her about your Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2 dièse et supérieur à épisode, about the glass you threw, about how you threatened Mom." "What?" Mark stammered. "Sarah, what are you talking about? She is unstable." "Mark," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic, manipulative purr. "Look at her. She is cold. She is detached. It is postpartum psychosis. We cannot let her near the baby. It is not safe." Patricia reached for the handle of the car seat. "Give him to me. Zoe, you need to leave. We have called a facility. They are expecting you." Mark looked at me, then at his mother. "Mom, this is crazy. She just gave birth. She is fine, is she?" Patricia snapped. "She hid $50,000 of debt from you." "Mark, she lied about her finances. Do you really think she is telling the truth about her sanity? She is a danger to this child. Now, give me the baby and get off my property." She grabbed the car seat handle. I did not pull back. I did not scream. I looked her dead in the eye. "Your property?" I asked softly. "Yes, my property," Patricia yelled. "I am the owner of this estate, and I am telling you to leave." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that made Mark step back. "Patricia, I said, my voice steady and loud enough for the neighbors to hear. You do not own this property, Patricia sneered. Excuse me? I have the deed. You have a deed to a house that was foreclosed on yesterday, I said, the color drained from her face. What? I pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed a number. Now, Frank, I said into the phone. A black SUV that had been parked down the street, engine idling, suddenly roared to life. It sped up the driveway, followed closely by a sheriff's cruiser with its lights flashing. Patricia and Sarah stared in horror as the vehicles screeched to a halt on the gravel. Frank stepped out of the SUV. He was a large man, wearing a trench coat and holding a thick stack of papers. A uniformed sheriff's deputy stepped out of the cruiser. What is this? Sarah screamed. Mark, do something. Mark looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Sui? I turned to Patricia. Do you remember the papers you signed 3 days ago? I asked. The ones for the $1 million investment? Patricia's hands began to shake. Yes. Saoyu Tsing Haoling. 2# is greater than the trust. Saoyu Tsing Haoling. R. Tsing Hao Dayu. There is no trust, I said, and there is no investment. I nodded to Frank. He walked up the ramp and handed a document to the sheriff. The sheriff stepped forward, adjusting his belt. Patricia Miller? He asked. Yes, she whispered. I am serving you with an order of ejectment and an immediate foreclosure judgment, the sheriff said. Patricia stumbled back. Foreclosure? But Saoyu Tsing Haoling, 2# is greater than the bank gave me 90 days. They did. I interrupted, until I bought the note. I stepped closer to her. Still holding my son, my lawyer bought your debt from the bank yesterday morning. Patricia, using the investment papers you signed, which included a confession of judgment, you agreed that if the debt was not current, which it was not, the lien holder could take immediate possession. I am the lien holder. Patricia, I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. I own the debt. I own the house. And you are trespassing. No, Patricia shrieked. She lunged at me. You lying witch. You tricked me. The sheriff stepped in between us, his hand resting on his holster. Ma'am, step back, he ordered. By now, the commotion had drawn an audience. Mrs. Higgins from next door was standing at her fence. The mailman had stopped his truck. A jogger had paused on the road. This is my house, Patricia screamed, her facade of the elegant matriarch shattering completely. My father built this house. She is stealing it. She is a thief. Mark looked at the papers the sheriff was holding. He read the top line. Plaintiff, Zoe Miller. Defendant, Patricia Miller. So, Mark whispered, looking at me with terror. What did you do? I protected my son, I said coldly, which is what you should have done. Sarah tried to push past the sheriff. You cannot kick us out. We have rights. We live here, actually. Frank interjected, his voice calm and gravelly. You are technically squatters. The previous owner, Patricia, defaulted. The new owner, Zoe, has not issued you a lease. And given the history of domestic disturbance and the presence of a newborn, Saoyu Tsing Haoling, R. Tsing Hao Dayu, he looked at the sheriff. Sheriff, my client feels unsafe with these 2 individuals on the premises. We would like them removed immediately. The sheriff nodded. He looked at Patricia and Sarah. You have 15 minutes to gather your personal essentials, the sheriff said. You can call the civil court on Monday to dispute it. But right now, the deed holder wants you off the property. 15 minutes? Patricia wailed. She fell to her knees on the dirty porch. This is not happening. Mark, help me. She is the devil. Mark looked at his mother, sobbing on the floor. He looked at his sister, who was screaming obscenities at the mailman. Then he looked at me, standing calm and strong with our son in my arms. Mark, I said, you have a choice. You can stay here with your wife and son, or you can get in the car with them. Mark looked at the driveway. He looked at the house. Mom, he said, his voice trembling. You, Saoting 2# is greater than you told me the land was worth 5 million. Patricia stopped crying. She looked up. Mark, listen to me. Saoting Ling, Dayu. You told me it was an inheritance. Mark yelled, his face turning red. You told me to sell our apartment. You made us homeless for a lie. He turned away from her. He walked over to me and stood by my side. I am staying with my son, Mark said. Patricia let out a sound that was not human. It was a howl of pure, animalistic rage. You ungrateful traitor, she screamed. I gave you life. The sheriff grabbed her arm. Come on, Mrs. Miller. Let us not make this harder than it has to be. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as the sheriff escorted Patricia and Sarah into the house to pack their bags. They watched as the grand dames of the Oakwood estate were reduced to 2 hysterical women shoving clothes into garbage bags under police supervision. 10 minutes later, they were back on the porch. Sarah was dragging 2 suitcases. Patricia was clutching a jewelry box. Where are we supposed to go? Patricia hissed at me as she passed. We have nowhere. I looked at her. I hear the Motel 6 on the highway has weekly rates. I said, or maybe you can find a nice storage room to rent. I hear they are very cozy. Patricia lunged again, but Sarah held her back. You will pay for this. Patricia spat. God will punish you. God saw what you tried to do to a pregnant woman. I replied, I think he is the one signing the eviction notice. They got into Sarah's beat-up Honda. The engine sputtered before turning on. As they backed out of the driveway, Patricia stared at me through the window. Her eyes were black holes of hate. I watched them drive away until the car disappeared around the bend. The sheriff tipped his hat to me. We will keep a patrol car in the area tonight. Ma'am, he said, just in case they come back. Thank you, Sheriff, I said. Frank walked over. He handed me a set of keys. I had a locksmith change the tumblers on the back and side doors while you were at the hospital. He said, I figured you would want the front door done now. You are a lifesaver, Frank, I said. I turned to go inside. Mark was still standing on the porch, staring at the empty driveway. He looked like a man who had survived a bombing but lost his hearing. Mark, I said. He turned to look at me. His eyes were full of tears and confusion. Zoe, Saoting Ling, 2# is greater than, he whispered. You own the house? I own the house. Mark, I said. He looked at the baby, sleeping in my arms. And the $1 million? He asked. The trust. I walked past him, opening the front door. Come inside. Mark, I said, we have a lot to talk about, and you have a lot of apologizing to do. I walked into the foyer. It was quiet. The smell of Patricia's lemon polish was still there, but underneath it, I could smell the fresh air coming in from the open door. I walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa that Patricia had claimed as her throne. I looked down at Leo. He opened his eyes. They were gray, just like mine. The public fallout was over. The neighbors had seen the truth. The matriarch had been dethroned. But as I looked at Mark walking tentatively into the room, looking like a guest in his own childhood home, I knew the hardest part was not evicting his mother. It was deciding whether to evict him. The silence that followed the sheriff's departure was not peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums like the pressure drop before a hurricane. For the first hour, I did not move from the living room sofa. I sat there, clutching Leo against my chest, listening to the house settle. Without the constant drone of Patricia's television and the sharp clack of Sarah's heels, the Oakwood estate revealed its true voice. The floorboards groaned under unseen weights. The wind whistled through cracks in the window frames that I had never noticed before. It sounded like a dying animal taking shallow breaths. Mark was in the kitchen. I could hear him opening and closing cabinets, the clink of glass against stone. He was pacing. I knew that walk. It was the walk of a man trying to find a task to justify his existence. I looked down at my son. He was sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that was the only pure thing in this entire zip code. Eventually, Mark walked into the living room. He held a glass of water. His eyes were red and swollen, his face blotchy. He looked like a child who had been scolded, not a 34-year-old man who had just watched his mother get evicted. "Here," he said, his voice cracking. "You should drink." For the milk, I looked at the glass. I did not take it. "Put it on the table," I said. Mark flinched at the coldness in my tone. He set the glass down on a coaster, one of the few my mother-in-law had not stolen or broken. He sat on the edge of the armchair opposite me, leaning forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Zoo," he started. I cut him off. "Do not," I said. "Do not start with an apology. I do not have the energy to sift through your guilt to find the truth right now." Mark swallowed hard. "I genuinely did not know. Zoe, I swear on Leo's life. She told me the inheritance was real. She showed me papers. I thought, Sao Yu Jing Hao, Ling. 2# is greater than I thought. I was doing the right thing for us." I looked at him. I studied his face, the jawline I used to kiss, the eyes I used to trust. "You did not know because you did not want to know," I said quietly. "You wanted the fairy tale. Mark, you wanted to be the heir to a $5 million estate more than you wanted to be my husband. You watched them lock me in a storage room. You watched them starve me, and you told yourself it was for my own good because that was easier than standing up to her. That is not fair." Mark whispered. I was scared. "She said you were sick." "I am not the one who is sick," I replied. I stood up, careful not to wake the baby. My body ached. The stitches from the birth pulled tight, a physical reminder of the trauma my body had endured while my mind was fighting a war. "I am going to the bedroom," I said. "The master suite." Mark stood up quickly. "I will help you. I will bring your bags up." I stopped him with a look. "No," I said. "You will stay down here." Mark froze. "What? You are not sleeping in the same bed as me." "Mark, not tonight. Maybe not ever." "Zoe, please," he begged, tears spilling over again. "I am your husband. We just had a baby. Do not shut me out." "I am not shutting you out," I said. "I am evicting you from my intimacy, just like I evicted your mother from my house. You can sleep in the storage room." His face crumbled. "The room where Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling are Jing Hao Dayu." "Yes," I said. "The room where you let me rot for weeks." "It is only fitting. The mattress is a bit lumpy, and it smells like mothballs, but I am sure you will manage. After all, it is the warmest room in the house." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the dark, empty living room. The climb up the stairs was slow. Every step was a victory. When I reached the master suite, I pushed the door open. It was a shrine to Sarah. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Cheap polyester blouses, mismatched socks. The vanity was covered in sticky makeup spills. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. I felt a surge of nausea. I placed Leo in the portable bassinet I had brought up. Then, I went to work. I did not have the strength to deep clean, but I had the strength to purge. I grabbed a black garbage bag from the bathroom closet. I began sweeping Sarah's things into it. Her lotions, her magazines, her dirty laundry. I did not fold anything. I did not check pockets. I shoved it all into the bag with a violence that frightened me. I stripped the bed. The sheets smelled of them. I balled them up and threw them into the hallway. I found a clean set of linens in the closet. My linens, the Egyptian cotton ones I had brought from New York that they had stolen. I made the bed. When I was done, I sat on the edge of the mattress. My hands were trembling. I looked around the room. It was large, with high ceilings and crown molding that was rotting in the corners. The wallpaper was peeling. I took out my phone and called Frank. "You okay?" Frank asked. He did not say hello. He just asked the question that mattered. "I am alive." I said, "They are gone." "Good." Frank said, "Now comes the hangover." "I know," I said. I looked at the papers I had placed on the nightstand. The reality of my victory was starting to sink in. I own the debt. "Frank," I whispered, "I own a $300,000 mortgage on a house that is falling apart. I have no job. I have a newborn. And I have a husband who is useless." "You have leverage," Frank corrected. "You control the asset. You can sell it. You can renovate it. You can burn it down for the insurance money. Though I legally cannot recommend that." I laughed. A short, dry sound. "I cannot sell it yet." I said, "I have nowhere to go. New York is too expensive. My credit is ruined until I pay off the cards Patricia maxed out. Then you hunker down." Frank said, "You fix the credit. You fix the house. You build a fortress. And zoo? Yeah? Watch your back. Rats do not like being kicked out of the sewer. They will try to crawl back in." "I know," I said. "Thank you, Frank." I hung up. I walked to the window. It overlooked the driveway. I could see the moon reflecting off the hood of Mark's car. I saw a shadow move on the porch below. He was sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. I felt a pang of something. Pity, perhaps, or maybe just the phantom pain of a limb that had been severed. I had loved him. I had loved him so much that I hid my debts to be perfect for him. I had loved him so much I followed him to this hellhole. But love requires respect to survive. And I looked at that man on the porch, and I realized I did not respect him. I saw a boy who needed a mommy, not a man who wanted a wife. I turned away from the window. I picked up Leo. He was awake, his gray eyes staring up at me with an intensity that pierced my soul. "I am sorry," I whispered to him. "I am sorry your first home is a battlefield. I am sorry your father is a coward." Leo blinked. He reached out a tiny hand and grasped my finger. His grip was surprisingly strong. "But I promise you this," I said, my voice hardening in the empty room. "You will never be a victim. I will teach you to see the teeth behind the smile. I will teach you that blood does not mean loyalty." I laid him back down. I turned off the lamp. I lay in the darkness, listening to the wind rattle the window panes. I was the lady of the manor now. I was the owner of the Oakwood estate. But as I closed my eyes, I did not feel like a queen. I felt like a survivor of a shipwreck, sitting on a pile of debris, watching the sharks circle in the distance. The adrenaline was gone. The rage was ebbing away, leaving behind a vast, hollow crater in my chest. I cried then. I buried my face in the pillow so Mark would not hear me downstairs. I cried for the girl I used to be, the interior designer who worried about color palettes and throw pillows. She was dead. She had died in that storage room. The woman who woke up in her place was stronger. Yes, she was sharper. She was ruthless, but she was also incredibly, profoundly lonely. And the silence of the house was the only answer I got. 6 months later, the snow began to fall on New York City. It was not the dirty, slushy gray snow that accumulates in the gutters of Midtown. It was the soft, powder white snow that blankets the rooftops of Queens, turning the jagged skyline into something almost peaceful. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom walk-up in Astoria, not a luxury high-rise. Holding a mug of hot tea, the steam rose in the frigid air, curling like smoke signals. Inside, Leo was practicing his tummy time on a colorful playmat. He was pushing himself up on his chubby arms, his gray eyes wide with determination. He looked like a little lion learning to stalk. My phone buzzed on the railing. It was a video call request. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the green button. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and tapped the screen. Mark's face appeared. He looked different. The soft edges of the corporate husband I used to know were gone. His face was gaunt, his skin tanned and weathered from the sun. He was wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a flannel shirt. Behind him, I could see the skeletal frame of a house under construction. "Hi, Zooey," he said. His voice was rough, tired. "Hi, Mark," I replied. He squinted at the screen. "Is that him? Is that Leo?" I turned the camera so he could see our son. Mark's face softened, a mixture of love and profound, crushing regret washing over his features. He pressed his hand against his screen, as if trying to touch the child he was missing growing up. "He is getting so big," Mark whispered. "He looks just like you. He has your nose," I said. It was a kindness I did not have to offer, but one I gave anyway. Mark pulled his hand back. He looked down at his boots. "I sent the check yesterday," he said. "It is not much. The foreman cut my hours because of the rain last week, but it is $600. I nodded. "Thank you. I will put it in his college fund." Mark swallowed hard. "And Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than, and the rest?" "Toward the debt? We are getting there," I said. The sale of the house covered the mortgage and the credit cards Patricia stole. But my old debt, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than the $50,000. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I am paying that myself. Mark looked up, surprised. "Why? I told you I would pay it. It is my penance." "No," I said firmly. "That debt was my mistake. Mark, it was the crack in the armor that let the monsters in. If I had been honest with you from the start, none of this would have happened. I need to pay it to remind myself never to be that weak again." Mark nodded slowly. He understood. He looked around the construction site. "I am living in a studio apartment now," he said. "It is near the site. It is small. No view. It sounds practical." I said, "How is Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling? 2 hashes greater than how is Mom?" He asked. He asked it like one asks about a tumor. I said. I looked out at the snow. "Frank checks on them once a month," I said. "They are in a trailer park outside of Richmond. Sarah is working at a diner. Patricia, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than she spends her days writing letters to the governor, claiming I stole her ancestral land. Nobody listens to her. Mark closed his eyes. I am sorry, Sue. I am so sorry. I know, I said, and I believe you. Can I? Saotsing Ling. 2# is greater than can I come up for Christmas? He asked. His voice broke. Just for a day? I will stay in a hotel. I just want to hold him. I looked at my son, who was now rolling over, gurgling with triumph. I looked at the man on the screen, a man who had been stripped of his entitlement, his comfort, and his mother's influence. He was rebuilding himself from the ground up, brick by painful brick. Not this Christmas. Mark, I said gently. He flinched, but he nodded. Work on yourself. Mark, I continued. Keep sending the checks. Keep building houses. When you have built a foundation that does not crumble when the wind blows, then we can talk about visits. He wiped his eyes with the back of his dirty glove. Okay, he whispered. I will. I promise. Goodbye. Mark, I ended the call. I walked back inside and set the phone down. I picked up Leo, holding him close. He smelled of milk and baby powder, the sweetest scent in the world. I walked over to the desk in the corner. On the wall, framed in simple black wood, was the final statement from the bank, paid in full. Below it was a photo of the Oakwood estate. But it was not the house standing. It was the empty lot. I had sold the land to a developer who bulldozed the rotting Victorian to build affordable housing. Patricia's legacy was now going to be a home for 50 families who actually needed it. I sat down in the rocking chair. I thought about the girl I was a year ago, that Zoe was terrified of conflict. She bought designer handbags to feel worthy. She hid bills in a drawer because she thought love was conditional on perfection. That girl was dead. Patricia had tried to destroy me. She had tried to steal my life, my child, and my sanity. She wanted to turn me into a servant, a silent ghost in her crumbling kingdom. But she made a fatal error. She thought she was breaking a porcelain doll. She did not realize she was tempering steel. I looked down at Leo, who was falling asleep in my arms. The world will tell you to be nice. I whispered to him, it will tell you to forgive and forget. But sometimes, forgiveness is just permission for them to hurt you again. I kissed his forehead. Your grandmother wanted a fairy tale. I thought, she wanted to be the wicked queen who locks the princess in the tower. She wanted to strip me of my finery and leave me in the ashes. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of New York, shining bright and hard and real. They wanted to make me Cinderella. I said to the empty room, they wanted me to wait for a prince to save me, but they forgot how the story really ends for the villains. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, the smile reached my eyes. I am not Cinderella. I am the wolf who learned how to wear grandmother's clothes, and I am never letting anyone blow my house down again.